I'm gonna give away all the secrets. This is the last video you'll ever need to watch about this topic. Welcome to the complete guide to intermittent fasting. If you're completely brand new, then this is gonna be the perfect video for you. Heck, even if you're experienced, you'll still get tremendous value from this. Especially if you're not getting the results that you want from whatever diet you're following, you're finally gonna get some answers. I'm gonna walk you through everything you need to know about intermittent fasting so you can finally lose all your stubborn and unwanted body fat that's been living rent-free in your body all this time. With that being said, let's get into the masterclass. Now, in this first section, I'm gonna show you the different intermittent fasting schedules you can follow and the pros and cons of each one. And then I'm gonna make a recommendation about which one you should be following. First up is the 12-hour fast. Back in the 60s, this was completely normal. You would eat at 7 o'clock in the morning, for example, and then you would eat at 6 o'clock, and then you would finish eating dinner at 7 p.m. So you have a balance of a 12-hour eating window and a 12-hour fasting window. And we didn't have an obesity epidemic back then. And then everything changed when the USDA released its first dietary guidelines for Americans. And this is your classic food pyramid where the base is you're eating 6 to 12 servings of grains, and then you're eating fruits and vegetables, like 5 servings of fruits and vegetables. And then the very top of it is that you would eat fat sparingly. So this is your classic high carb, low fat diet. That was released back in 1980, and that was also the start of the obesity epidemic in the US. So we switched to a high carb, low fat diet, and we also started eating more frequently. Snacking became a thing, and we started eating more refined carbs and processed carbs in the process. So we started eating granola bars and protein bars, meals on the go and whatnot. We went from 3 meals a day back in 1960 to 6 meals a day in 2003, and we still do this up to this day. We started eating more processed carbs, which triggers a high insulin response in your body. And this is important because insulin is what controls your body weight. And persistently high levels of insulin because of this high frequency of your meals causes insulin resistance. This is also called metabolic syndrome, which is the precursor for prediabetes, then diabetes, obesity, and heart disease. If you're new to this, if you're new to intermittent fasting, the 12-hour fast is your baseline, okay? Especially if you're one of these people who eats 6 meals a day, you snack on food all day, you graze on food all day, the 12-hour fast is step number 1 for you. You wanna just start by eating 3 meals a day, like a normal human being. I personally think that if everyone just ate 3 meals a day and they ate whole foods, unprocessed foods, we would not have an obesity epidemic. But that's another topic for another video. But again, there are levels to this, and the 12-hour fast is that first level. But if you're trying to lose weight and you have a lot of weight to lose, the 12-hour fast simply isn't enough. It only gets you to that break-even point, which leads us to the 16-hour fast. The 16-hour fast is more commonly referred to as the lean gains method. It's popularized by a guy named Martin Berkhan, so kudos to him. And it's probably the most popular intermittent fasting schedule. It's also one of my favorites. And the protocol is pretty simple. It asks for a 16-hour fasting window and an 8-hour eating window. And ideally, in that 8-hour eating window, you're only eating 2 big meals. For example, you eat a late breakfast at, let's say, 9 a.m., and then you finish eating dinner by, let's say, 5 p.m. So that gets you your 8-hour eating window from 9 until 5 p.m. Another way to do this is by skipping breakfast, and then you eat your typical lunch at noon, and then you finish eating dinner by 8 p.m. So your eating window then is 12 p.m. till 8 p.m. And the latter is what I normally do because it's really easy to skip breakfast, right? Like most people are not hungry first thing in the morning. Like I remember force feeding myself breakfast back when I went to college, and I was also fat back then. But then everyone goes, isn't breakfast the most important meal of the day? And the short answer is no. The word breakfast literally means break fast. You're breaking your fast from the night before, which means that you don't necessarily have to eat first thing in the morning. Your quote-unquote breakfast is whenever you eat for the first time the next day, which means that you can have your breakfast at noon. And the thing is, if you're eating breakfast cereal, instant oatmeal, your definition of breakfast is stopping by your closest drive-through window and ordering a breakfast sandwich, you're way better off skipping breakfast altogether. For that specific person, breakfast might be the most important meal to skip. A major advantage of the 16-hour fast is that it's really easy to follow. Because most of the time we schedule lunch and dinner with friends and family, right? We don't really schedule, let's have a family breakfast. So when you consider social norms, it's way easier to stick to. And you can ease your way into this. So if you're somebody who's used to eating breakfast at, let's say, 7 a.m., see if you can adjust it to 8 a.m., right? So adjust it an hour later, and then 9 a.m., and then 10 a.m. And eventually, you're just gonna wanna skip breakfast altogether. It's also been shown that the benefits of fasting doesn't start until the 16-hour mark. Next up is the 20-hour fast. And this is more commonly referred to as the warrior diet. And it's popularized by a guy named Ori Hofmeckler. Apparently, Spartans back in the day only ate in the evening, hence the name warrior. The warrior diet asks for a 20-hour window and a 4-hour eating window. When you follow this protocol, you're usually eating just one smaller meal and then one big meal, or vice versa. And adherence to this diet probably isn't as high compared to the 16-hour fast because you need to start planning ahead, especially if you have events going on that day. You're meeting up with people, you're meeting up with friends and family for lunch and dinner because, like I said, you only have a 4-hour eating window. But it works really well in terms of fat loss because now your fasting window gets longer and you're allowing your insulin levels to get really low for a long period of time. And then it's kind of hard to eat a lot of calories in a 4-hour eating window. Next up is the 24-hour fast. Some people refer to this as the OMAD diet. And as the name implies, OMAD means just one meal a day. You can go from dinner to dinner, lunch to lunch, or breakfast to breakfast. Just pick one that works best with your schedule. And despite the name, you don't actually go a full day without eating. And I personally think that this is one of the most powerful methods of intermittent fasting because you allow your insulin levels to get really low for like 90% of the day. And then you're just eating all your calories in one meal. And you can still do this even if you're taking medication because again, you're not going a full day without food. So you can still take your medication that requires you to take it with food. Now, the 24-hour fast is a more advanced method of intermittent fasting and you definitely want to put more effort into this. You need to plan ahead of time. If you have a lunch meeting or you're meeting up with friends for dinner, then you want to schedule your one meal around that time period. But it's totally worth doing because its effectiveness is almost unparalleled. It just takes a little bit of time to get used to. Again, if you're somebody who typically eats 6 meals a day, I don't recommend going from 6 meals a day to just 1 meal a day. Again, there are levels to this, right? So start by eating just 3 meals a day and then do a 16-hour fast. And then from that point, you can decide if you want to continue extending that eating window to 20 or 24 hours. And then you get into extended fasts like a 36-hour fast, 48-hour fast, or even like a full week without eating. But those are definitely more advanced methods of fasting. And I find that the longer you go, the harder it is to follow. And then things get taken up a notch when you get into dry fasting, where you go for a short period of time without food or water. Like, it sounds pretty wild, but Muslims actually do dry fasting every year during the period of Ramadan, where they go from sunrise to sunset without eating food or drinking water, and they're perfectly fine. But again, that's when it starts to get pretty inconvenient because a lot of people at least can go without food, but it's definitely way harder to go without water or coffee first thing in the morning. But here's the thing, adherence is everything when it comes to achieving long-term sustainable results. And you want to aim for the minimum effective dose, right? So you want to aim for the minimum amount of work. So for this instance, the minimum amount of fasting window that still gets you maximum results. Personally, I recommend doing a daily 16-hour fast combined with a 24-hour fast once or twice a week, depending on how aggressive you are in terms of achieving your fat loss goals. And that strategy does two things. I mentioned earlier that a 16-hour fast is the minimum effective dose of intermittent fasting, so you definitely want to do that. And honestly, even if you just do a daily 16-hour fast, especially if it's your first time doing it, you're gonna get amazing results. And then if you combine it with a 24-hour fast once or twice a week, that's when you really get into accelerated fat loss. Because again, a 24-hour fast allows your insulin levels to get really low and your body is then able to tap into your fat stores for energy. Listen, at the end of the day, the best intermittent fasting schedule is the one that you're able to stick to. As long as you're doing some form of it, you're way ahead of 95% of the population who thinks that eating 6 meals a day will somehow make them lose weight. And this is my favorite question to ask to anybody who thinks that, intermittent fasting doesn't produce results, is that, what do you think will happen if you don't eat? What do you think will happen, let's say, if you normally eat 3 meals a day and you just eat 2 meals a day? You're gonna lose weight. If you do a 24-hour fast and you just eat 1 meal, you're gonna lose even more weight. I mean, that's not rocket science, right? My last advice is that whatever intermittent fasting schedule you pick, make sure that you're pairing it with a diet that moderates your insulin levels. Make sure you revolve your diet around plants and animals. Make sure you're eating nutrient-dense foods. Don't drink liquid calories. Avoid processed carbs and added sugar. If you do that, then you're really gonna maximize your results from intermittent fasting. Okay, now that you know what the minimum effective dose and what the best intermittent fasting schedule for weight loss is, let's look at how to do intermittent fasting properly. Because there are levels to this. There's definitely rules to intermittent fasting. Don't worry, I'm also going to show you some ninja tricks on how to make intermittent fasting easier. This is the stuff I wish I knew when I was just starting out. Let's start with the prerequisite. Don't start with intermittent fasting. Again, there are levels. If you're someone who's got really bad eating habits or your diet is complete junk, you need to fix that first. If you just start fasting when your diet is still an absolute dumpster fire, that's basically like signing up for a marathon when your only form of exercise is walking back and forth to the fridge. How do you think that's gonna go? First and foremost, you need to stop eating like a butt. Because it's not about going from 0 to 100 here. That rarely ever works. It's just not sustainable. How about we just focus on going from 0 to 1 and then we just build from that? Baby steps. If you're somebody who eats chips, cookies, candy, granola bars, you drink multiple cans of Coke or Diet Coke, you need to start by replacing those with healthier alternatives like nuts, cheese, hard-boiled eggs, dark chocolate, and water. If you're somebody who eats 6 meals a day, you need to cut that down to 5 and 4 and then just 3 square meals. That is ground zero. A lot of people struggle mightily when they do intermittent fasting because they find out about it and how awesome it is, so they do it, but they don't really adjust their diet. So they get really hungry, they get headaches, they feel fatigued, they have the worst time doing it, so they quit. And then they say it didn't work for them. Thanks, Captain Obvious. It's actually perfectly normal to feel like crap because your body is literally freaking out. It's going through carb withdrawals. This could even backfire on you because it's just way too stressful to your body. Here's the thing. If you just do the things I just mentioned and get to a proper baseline with your diet, you're going to be pleasantly surprised how good you're going to feel, how much energy you'll have, and how much weight you're going to lose. Only then should you even start thinking about intermittent fasting. If you don't, you are going to have an absolutely miserable time doing it. Now, once you've made those small changes, comes step number 1. Pick a fasting schedule that fits your lifestyle. Pull up your schedule. Are you single? Do you have kids? When do you have a sit-down meal with your family? Do you work during the day or at night? Are you on your feet all day or do you have a desk-bound job? Do you like to go out on weekends? Once you evaluate those things, you need to look at where you can fit intermittent fasting into your schedule. It needs to be part of your lifestyle. This is important because you want to schedule your fast around your life and not the other way around. For example, for a lot of people with a 9-to-5 job, skipping breakfast is usually the best and easiest option. If you do that, you'll just have lunch and dinner. If you eat those 2 meals in an 8-hour eating window, there's your 16-hour fast. A really easy way to get more fasting time, by the way, is by eating your dinner early. The ideal scenario is to finish eating as the sun is going down. This matches perfectly with your circadian rhythm, resulting in better sleep. Speaking of a 16-hour fast, 16 hours is the minimum effective dose of intermittent fasting. Just as important is the amount of meals you're eating during your eating window. You want to keep it to just 2. You can obviously go longer with your fast. You can do 18, 20, 22, all the way to a 24-hour fast. At that point, you're just eating 1 meal. Next, fasting is about flexibility, not rigidity. There's this thing called life that happens all the time. You have weddings, birthdays, celebrations, holidays, your dog's birthday, and so on. It's okay when those things come about when you're fasting. You want to balance fasting with feasting. It's perfectly fine to have a cheat meal here and there. Because at the end of the day, you always want to solve for your highest quality of life. That's what it's about. I'd much rather maintain 14% body fat, for example, but have tons of flexibility with my diet where I don't feel bad enjoying a slice of cheesecake every once in a while, and I do, rather than being under 10% body fat, but I'm stuck eating plain chicken breast and steamed broccoli for the rest of my life. Where's the fun in that? That's why I'm such a big proponent of the 90-10 rule when it comes to achieving long-term sustainable results. 90% of the time, stick to the program. The other 10%, when life happens, you're okay. You can enjoy yourself guilt-free. You don't even think about it. It doesn't even faze you. Are you gonna be carrying excess water weight the next day when you splurge? Maybe, but that's fine. It's not a big deal. You're 1 good meal away from being back on track. The ability to quickly get over a cheat meal and not let it snowball into another one is a superpower in itself. And having that type of flexibility increases adherence drastically. The best diet and fasting schedule is the one you can stick to. If you're following a fasting schedule that doesn't allow for life to happen, you're doing it wrong. Next, don't be a purist. Water, black coffee, black tea, or green tea are the classic drinks you're allowed to have during a fast. That's a given. The water fast purists will even say that coffee breaks your fast. Well, it kind of depends how you want to look at fasting and what benefits you're looking for. Because the amount of caffeine in 2 cups of coffee, for example, doubles ketone production. Why is that important? Well, when ketones go up, ghrelin, which is your hunger hormone, goes down. And CCK, a satiety hormone, goes up. Who doesn't want to feel less hungry during a fast? Being hungry sucks. Now, the fasting police will get mad at this, But an unbelievably powerful hack to make fasting easier is by drinking bulletproof coffee in the morning. It's where you put a little bit of grass-fed butter and C8 MCT oil in your coffee, and then you blend it. And it turns into this delicious guilt-free latte. But then people say, but you had calories. That's not fasting. If you're counting calories, sure. But hear me out. I'm trying to make your life easier here. It still works because your insulin stays constant. Bulletproof coffee does not raise insulin. They've done tests on this. Keeping your insulin stable is one of the big things you're trying to achieve when you fast. Your body stays in fat burning mode. The next big benefit that we want to maintain is autophagy, which is a cleanse on a cellular level. This is why fasting can help prevent cancer. If you don't eat protein, autophagy stays on. Well, bulletproof coffee doesn't contain protein. Yes, you have this delicious coffee with 200 calories of fat. But that doesn't really matter because your body converts those calories into usable energy right away in the form of ketones, which then turns off hunger and you get to maintain autophagy. All of a sudden, fasting becomes a breeze. You don't even notice it. A lot of the fasting purists think that it's cheating when you use a hack like bulletproof coffee because you didn't want to suffer, as if you get bonus points when you suffer more than necessary. You don't get a medal for suffering here. If you can still get the metabolic benefits of fasting, you get to turn down your risk of diabetes, obesity, cancer, and cardiovascular disease without the misery of hunger. Why would you not want to take the path of least resistance? Next, you want to pair fasting with the proper diet. I have a lot of videos that dives into this topic in further detail, so make sure to check those out. But the beauty of intermittent fasting is that it works with any diet. Some are better than others, obviously. I don't even like diet labels because people just become so dogmatic about it. But I personally prefer a high-fat, moderate protein, low-carb diet because it's the best diet to moderate insulin. Insulin is the hormone that controls your body weight. When insulin stays moderated, it allows you to tap into your almost unlimited fat stores and burn it for energy. You know, those 100,000 calories that's just waiting to be used? This is called metabolic flexibility. Personally, I'm on a mostly carnivore-ish type of diet, and this is the physique I maintain, and I have high quality of life, so I'm happy with it. But as always, just keep it simple. Stick to single ingredient, mostly processed, nutrient-dense foods. For example, eat chicken thigh instead of chicken nuggets. The former has one ingredient, while the latter is a food-like product that's been processed to the nth degree. Next, you want to make other lifestyle choices that complement intermittent fasting. I always like to say that there are 4 pillars of health: nutrition, exercise, sleep, and stress. Intermittent fasting is part of nutrition. You can't just focus on one and just say it to the others. They all need to work together in unison. Let's quickly talk about exercise, and let me just simplify this for you. I'd like to think that I have some street cred here because I'm literally the definition of a gym rat. I was also a competitive athlete for years. If your goal is to just lose weight, fit better into your clothes, have a flat stomach, maybe even see some abs, or put on some muscle and have that tight and toned look, and I think that 95% of the general population will be happy with that. I'm gonna make a lot of gym owners unhappy when I say this. You don't ever need to step foot inside a gym if you don't want to, in order to achieve those things. If your baseline, for example, is you haven't worked out since gym class in high school, then the best workout you can do is literally just start moving your body. Start with a 10-minute walk every day and build on that. Eventually, you want to work towards getting 10,000 steps every day. For your workouts, you can get unbelievably fit just by using your own body weight as your form of resistance. The reason why you want to exercise is to build and maintain muscle, because having a lot of lean muscle mass is the key driver of your metabolism. It's also a strong indicator of lifespan. If you can train in a fasted state, great. If not, it's not the end of the world. By the way, if your lame excuse why you can't work out or go for a walk is you don't have time, when you skip a meal or two, that's gonna free up a lot of your time. Next, you wanna make sure you're getting adequate and quality sleep every night. According to Dr. Walker, from his book Why We Sleep, insufficient sleep, roughly defined as less than 7 hours per night, moves every health metric in the wrong direction. It increases insulin resistance and next-day hunger. It drives more food consumption and worse food choices. It raises blood pressure and significantly increases your risk of a heart attack. It compromises the immune system. It negatively impacts emotions and mood. And it raises your risk of depression and anxiety, all from getting less than 7 hours of sleep. If you get your daily dose, all those markers will improve. This to me is non-negotiable. Like, none of this is gonna work if you don't get your sleep right. By the way, our natural sleeping pattern is in the form of biphasic sleep, meaning it's actually good to take a 30 to 60-minute nap in the afternoon. You can bet that I'm a serial napper. I love napping. Next, make sure you're managing stress. Chronically high stress levels will sabotage any weight loss progress because you're constantly activating your fight or flight response. Whether that stress is coming from work, a bad relationship, financial problems, or chronic cardio patterns, your body treats all types of stress the same way. It releases cortisol. One of cortisol's main jobs is to flood your body with glucose so you have usable energy to fight or flight. It gets bad when this becomes chronic, because chronically elevated cortisol results in chronically elevated insulin levels, which then leads to systemic inflammation. Systemic inflammation is the root cause of a lot of disease, including cancer, obesity, diabetes, arthritis, and cardiovascular disease. From a day-to-day standpoint, stress eating is a big problem for a lot of people. One of the best ways to alleviate stress, and it's free, is practicing mindfulness through meditation and walking. Think of it as active meditation. And lastly, be patient. Think about it this way. It did not take you days or weeks to put on the weight that you're trying to lose. It probably took you months, if not years. Also, depending on how long you've been carrying the weight that you're trying to lose, aka how long you've been insulin resistant for, some people might not see results right away. That does not get mentioned enough. So be patient with yourself here. Think long term. Let's say you dedicate 6 months making all the necessary changes to turn this into a lifestyle, but in return, you get to improve your quality of life for the rest of your life. That is a small price to pay. Up next, I'm going to show you the hidden benefits of why adapting an intermittent fasting lifestyle can be life-changing. The first reason why you should fast every day is that it changes your relationship with food completely. And I wanted to start with this because this is extremely important if you're trying to lose weight. Because we are all creatures of habits. A lot of things that we do on a daily basis is honestly just based out of habits. And that includes eating. That includes eating at certain times. And breakfast is the perfect example of this. We've basically been taught since we were kids that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, right? And there's nothing inherently wrong with eating breakfast, by the way. It really depends what you eat. If you eat bacon and eggs and some avocado, for example, that sounds like a really good breakfast. On the other hand, if you just shove cornflakes, instant oatmeal, a protein bar or a granola bar and wash that down with a glass of orange juice, then that's a completely different story. Like, we are the only species that does those things, that shoves cornflakes down our throats first thing in the morning, even if we're not hungry. Like, Paleo Man didn't do that. Paleo Man didn't wake up first thing in the morning and say, oh, geez, better eat breakfast. No. Sometimes our Paleolithic ancestors would go days without food and they were perfectly fine. Like, lions don't wake up first thing in the morning and say, oh, I should probably eat breakfast. No. Again, scheduled meals are completely made up. And we live in a society where we use food as a form of entertainment. We also live in a very interesting time now where there are actually more obese people than there are hungry people. We don't have a hunger problem these days. We have an obesity epidemic. And once you start intermittent fasting and you do it every day, you take back some of that control over food, because now you are introducing a system of control. You're putting a cap on when you're eating, and it's not just a free-for-all all day. And I always say that what you eat and when you eat are equally as important if you're trying to lose weight and stay healthy. The problem is a lot of people that are trying to lose weight only focus on the what you eat part of the equation, right? They're stuck on the calories in versus calories out model of weight loss, eat less and move more. And that's what makes intermittent fasting so powerful when it comes to weight loss is even if you don't change what you eat, and you should, but then you reduce your eating window to just an 8-hour eating window, for example, I guarantee you're gonna lose weight. And once you start seeing results, that creates a positive feedback loop. You start making better decisions overall, and you start having a better relationship with food. You're not a slave to it anymore. Number 2, you should fast every day because it triggers a compounding effect. Intermittent fasting carries a lot of health benefits, like improved heart health, it boosts your brain, it increases your energy, it increases your metabolism, it improves your insulin sensitivity, and that's key. It builds your immune function, it increases growth hormones, it builds lean muscle, and so much more. And it makes you lose weight, a lot of weight. You get all those benefits without counting calories or following a complicated meal plan. Amazing, right? And there are multiple studies out there where they put a control group and an intermittent fasting group on a calorie maintenance diet. So neither of them lost weight because, again, they're eating at maintenance calories. Yet the hormonal elements are more positive with the intermittent fasting group, and they also have improved insulin sensitivity. So you know that intermittent fasting has positive elements regardless of weight loss. Long story short, there is a net positive physiological benefit when you fast. And why do I mention insulin specifically? Well, insulin is the hormone that controls your body weight. And now there are multiple studies that it's also the hormone that controls aging. Studies now show that one of the common features of centenarians, so these are people who live over 100, is that they're all very insulin sensitive. And when you do intermittent fasting every day adds up to the compounding effect of all the benefits I just mentioned, and that includes improving your insulin sensitivity. So the more you do it, the more benefit you get out of it. And this is the complete opposite of what's happening in the US and other countries following a Western diet, right? Like 70% of Americans are either overweight or obese, right? A lot of these people have diabetes, pre-diabetes, and they have a high risk of developing cardiovascular disease and even cancer. And all those diseases can be summed up using one term. It's called metabolic syndrome. And the precursor to metabolic syndrome is something called insulin resistance, which is the complete opposite of insulin sensitivity. And if you ask me, the choice becomes pretty simple if the question is whether you should fast every day. Reason number 3, fasting every day triggers fat adaptation faster. Being fat adapted or being metabolically flexible is something that everyone should be striving for if they want to lose weight and be healthy. Being fat adapted simply means that you're readily able to tap into fat stores for energy. And if you have weight to lose, that's exactly what you want. And since the adaptation of the first dietary guidelines for Americans, which came out in 1980, that food pyramid, where they recommend a mind-blowing 6 to 11 servings from the bread, pasta, rice, and cereal group. And if you ask me, that's 6 to 11 servings too many, which is also around the same time when the whole obesity epidemic started. Following a high-carb diet, or the standard American diet, is literally the definition of metabolic inflexibility. Now, when you start fasting every day and then you pair that with a diet that moderates your insulin levels, like the paleo diet or the ketogenic diet, you're basically turbocharging that fat adaptation process because your body will just use up all that extra glycogen during your fast. And studies have now shown that that process starts happening when you do a 16-hour fast. That's why I always say that the minimum effective dose of fasting is a 16-hour fast. So when you do intermittent fasting every day, you're getting your body more and more used to being fat adapted and achieve full genetic and hormone optimization. And I want you to think of fasting like a muscle. So the more you do it, the more you work out your muscle, the better you get at it, the bigger it gets. But again, let me remind you that there's about a 2-week adaptation period here where you might feel a little crummy, and that's perfectly normal, especially if you've been eating a high carb diet all this time. You're literally going through carb and sugar withdrawal. But the more you fast, the quicker you'll be fat adapted and the quicker you'll be able to tap into your fat stores for energy. How do I put this properly? It's stupid simple. You don't need to track your macros. You don't need to weigh and measure every gram you're about to eat. Although it does help at the beginning, just so you have some baseline numbers. You don't need to take a pill or buy overpriced supplements, most of which are a complete waste of money anyway. You might as well light your money on fire. None of those things. In fact, it's the complete opposite. You do nothing. You just don't eat. Like, one of the biggest, if not the biggest determining factor when it comes to your weight loss success is adherence. Can you stick to whatever you're doing long term or forever? If your diet starts to take over your life because you have to carry around little Tupperwares to eat your 5 to 6 meals, that sounds extremely inconvenient. Or maybe you identify on the extreme side of things, where you have to delete certain food groups like carbs, or thinking all plants are bad, and the opposite side of that is believing that eating meat is bad. Yeah, that might not be sustainable long term. Food has almost become a religion for some people. We now live in a society where food is offensive. Strange times. Or maybe your diet requires you to follow complicated recipes or strict meal plans. Like, who's got time for that? And this isn't about dissecting which diet is the best. You should check out my other videos about that topic. What I'm trying to say is, what could be more simple than doing nothing if you just skip the meal instead? There's no prepping, cooking, or cleanup afterwards. You don't need to delete certain food groups. It's simple. Simple is good, which means you're more likely to stick to it long term. Next, it's stupid simple and it works. I try to mention this concept as much as I can whenever I talk about intermittent fasting because this is key. You have at least 100,000 calories worth of stored energy in the form of body fat waiting to be used. That is what it's there for. It's not just there for looks. Even lean people have around 40,000 calories worth of body fat. So when you fast, and the minimum effective dose here is 16 hours, your body, being the supercomputer that it is, will simply tap into your fat stores and burn it for energy so you don't die. You can even expedite that process if you exercise in a fasted state, so you can deplete your glycogen stores even faster. Because when your glycogen stores are mostly empty, that's when you start burning fat. But that whole fat burning switch is controlled by the hormone insulin. A lot of experts consider it to be the master hormone because it's the hormone that controls your body weight. You need to keep your insulin response pulsatile if you want any chance of losing weight. The problem is, we now live in a society where 3 out of 4 American adults are in the overweight or obese category. 88% of those, so that's almost 9 out of every 10, have some form of metabolic dysfunction. Part of metabolic dysfunction is insulin resistance because of poor dietary and lifestyle choices. The scary part is by 2030, the US is now on pace to have a 50% obesity rate. That's when you can use intermittent fasting as an unbelievably powerful tool to combat metabolic syndrome. Because one of its benefits, and there's a laundry list of it, is that it improves insulin sensitivity. All you really need to know here is that every time you eat, insulin goes up. Again, it's a storing hormone, and when insulin is high, you cannot access your body fat and burn it for energy. You just can't. It gets locked away. And insulin is the key. So in short, high insulin blocks fat burning. The reverse is also true. Every time you don't eat, so when you fast, insulin goes back down to baseline. A counter-regulatory hormone called glucagon gets activated, which then triggers fat to get released and get combusted for energy. The key then is to keep that insulin response pulsatile. So it's not about eating less, but less frequently. I mean, quality matters, obviously. When you do eat, focus on eating nutrient-dense foods so you're not hungry again after 2 hours. Guys, this is how fat loss actually works. Yes, it's still calories in versus calories out. You need to be on a calorie deficit. But you need to also factor in key hormones like insulin, glucagon, cortisol, and thyroid for starters to get sustainable results. So calories matter, but hormones are more important. And from a practical standpoint, it's so much easier to create a calorie deficit if you just take out one of your meals, and this isn't anything new. The human body is actually designed to fast. It wasn't by choice back in the Paleolithic times when our ancestors went through periods of feast and famine. A lot of religions also have some sort of fasting integrated in their beliefs. It's been around for thousands of years, and fasting actually heals the body. Animals inherently know this. Think of your dog when it's not feeling well. It doesn't want to eat, right? Hippocrates, the father of medicine, said, "To eat when you're sick is to feed your sickness." And according to Benjamin Franklin, the best of all medicines is resting and fasting. We're most human when we fast. Next, fasting saves you money. And this is just simple math. You're eating fewer meals, which means you're automatically going to be spending less money on food. You can then invest some of that money that you save on buying higher quality food. You can buy organic vegetables, pastured eggs, and grass-fed and grass-finished beef. Think of it as an investment in your health, and your health is absolutely worth it. Confucius famously said, "A healthy man wants 1,000 things. A sick man only wants one thing." Benefit number 4, it's highly customizable. You can just pick an intermittent fasting schedule that best fits your lifestyle. You can be flexible with it because the best intermittent fasting schedule is the one that you can follow. I mentioned earlier that the minimum effective dose of intermittent fasting is 16 hours. So you can just look at your day and see where you can best fit your 8-hour eating window. For a lot of people, it's easy to just skip breakfast. For others, they'd rather eat sometime in the morning and eat an earlier dinner. The latter might actually be better. There's recent studies done by Dr. Sachin Panda at the Salk Institute that having an early dinner is actually better aligned with our natural circadian code. And it makes sense, like our genes evolve with the rising and setting of the sun. We're also more naturally insulin resistant at night, so it's better if you finish eating dinner early. But as long as you complete 16 consecutive hours in a fasted state, and that includes your sleep, you're fine. You can also mix it up, like your intermittent fasting schedule isn't set in stone. Maybe you skip breakfast on certain days or you skip dinner on other days. The key is to start slow. Like if you've never skipped breakfast in your entire adult life, there's gonna be an adjustment period. Think of fasting like a muscle. The more you work it, the better you get at it. So you need to know how to crawl first before you can run. Next, intermittent fasting allows you to feast. Again, back in the day, we would go through periods where food was scarce. Feast and famine. Nowadays, we spend way too much feasting, like grazing on food all day. We're like cows. Fasting is the great equalizer to this. It's literally the definition of voluntary hardship, which then creates mental fortitude. It's good for you. Now, I'm not saying here that you should use fasting as an excuse to hit up your local all-you-can-eat buffet when you do break your fast, but it definitely allows you to enjoy a little bit more flexibility, to enjoy the occasional treat and not have it affect your weight loss goals. For example, if you know you're having treats for dinner that night, maybe you skip breakfast and even lunch that day and just turn it into an OMAD fast or 1 meal a day fast and save all your calories for dinner. And if you're metabolically flexible, your body should be able to handle the potential calorie surplus. No problem. And then the next day, you can just get back into your regular intermittent fasting schedule. Next up, intermittent fasting frees up some of your precious time. The average person makes around 200 food-related decisions every day. That is a lot of brain power just spent on food. And then you add in the time that we spend preparing, cooking, eating, and then cleaning up afterwards. No wonder people say they just don't have time. So imagine getting some of your precious time and brain power back because you're simply eating less frequently, which then allows you to do other things like meal prep, exercise, and other productive stuff. Next, very important, I want to highlight this. Intermittent fasting is muscle sparing. This is a very common intermittent fasting myth that I can't believe still exists. You're not gonna waste away when you fast. In fact, it's the complete opposite. Your body holds on to your precious muscles. Again, this process is controlled by hormones. When you fast, insulin stays low and glucagon gets activated. It then unlocks your almost unlimited fat stores. Remember, the average person has at least 100,000 calories worth of stored body fat that you can now use for energy. This graph right here perfectly illustrates that. Protein oxidation, which is the blue line, after day 0 stays flat, which means your body doesn't break down muscle when you fast. While fat and ketones is usable energy when fat gets broken down in the liver. It's represented by the green line, stays high. All that really means is that your body predominantly uses fat for energy when you fast. And that stays consistent even after 30 days of fasting. I even did a 7-day water fast as an N=1 experiment to prove this when I was a competitive national level weightlifter. My sole job was to lift as much weight as I could overhead, and I still train every day. Here's day 7 of my fast, and I'm still lifting 85% of my max numbers with room to spare. Like, I didn't have a noticeable dip in my strength. In fact, I felt like I could see through walls. But I'm not even asking you to do a 7-day water fast here. You're only fasting anywhere between 16 to 23 hours. You're gonna be fine. You're not gonna waste away. Let's look at this other graph. Fasting after 24 hours has been shown to increase testosterone by 180% and growth hormone by up to 2,000% from the baseline. Those two hormones are crucial when it comes to building and maintaining muscle. So your body kind of knows what to do when you fast. In fact, a lot of experts consider growth hormone to be the real fountain of youth because of its anti-aging effects, and you can get a boost for free when you fast. Again, your body is really smart. It knows what to do. Do you know what actually makes you lose muscle as you lose weight? A crash diet. Especially if all you do is cardio and you don't do any resistance training. That's why you see a lot of people rock that skinny fat look when they lose weight on whatever crash diet or juice cleanse they're following. The sad part is they eventually put all the weight back on that they lost and then some because their metabolism has tanked as an adaptation. And lastly, the benefits of intermittent fasting goes way beyond fat loss. In fact, fat loss is just icing on the proverbial cake. You also get access to other amazing benefits like improved blood glucose control and insulin sensitivity, increased energy, it boosts your brain, it builds the immune system, it triggers autophagy, it heals the gut, you get a boost in growth hormone and its anti-aging effects, it improves your relationship with food because you're not so attached to it anymore, and so much more. Now, let's quickly talk about this thing called autophagy that I just mentioned. Think of it as a cleanse on a cellular level. This is next level stuff. Your body looks for old, damaged, and worn out cells and clears it out to produce new healthy cells. It's like your body's natural cellular recycling system. In 2016, a Japanese scientist named Yoshinori Ohsumi won the Nobel Prize for his discoveries into the mechanisms of autophagy, and it's led to a better understanding of diseases such as Parkinson's and dementia. It's kind of a big deal. And again, what triggers this amazing process? Fasting. But again, it's not the be-all end-all. The level of autophagy you get depends on your physical activity. For example, there was a study on the effects of a 36-hour fast between two groups. One group was physically active and fit. The other group was sedentary and overweight. Unsurprisingly, the group that was physically fit had autophagy levels in their white blood cells increased by 200%. The sedentary group did not see a statistically significant change in their autophagy. That's why you need to make other supportive lifestyle choices as well, like exercise when you fast. It's not a magic pill. Some experts even believe that autophagy is the main reason why fasting can help prevent cancer, because cancer cells are mutated and dysfunctional cells. My point is that there isn't a single supplement on the planet that could even come close to the benefits that intermittent fasting brings to the table. Find me a supplement. I'll wait. That's why I always say that if the benefits of intermittent fasting could be put in a pill, It would be the single greatest blockbuster medication of all time, right next to exercise. And you can get both for free. Now, the $1,000,000 question. How long does intermittent fasting take to work? As always, there's a little bit of nuance to that. Here's a detailed breakdown of what to expect. Okay, the real question is, how long does it take to get these results? And how long does it take to start seeing results? Now, those are two completely different questions with two completely different answers. First thing that we got to think about is, what is your goal in the first place? Because somebody who's looking to lose 10 pounds is going to achieve that a lot faster than somebody who's looking to lose 80 pounds. I mean, that's just simple math. It also depends how long you've been struggling to lose weight. That also factors in. There are levels to this. Now let's talk about fat loss first, specifically. Your results really depends where you're at before you start doing intermittent fasting. Let's say you've already got a good baseline, you're already eating healthy foods, and that's another thing that prevents a lot of people from losing weight, by the way, is that they're eating seemingly healthy foods that aren't actually so healthy, and it's actually preventing them from losing weight. So maybe you just need some direction on what you should be eating exactly and how much of it, so you can be fat adapted, you're metabolically flexible, you're able to easily tap into your fat stores for energy after you're done eating, which is the key to all this. All those things will trigger your fat burning mechanism, and it's gonna turn you into an unstoppable fat burning machine. On the other hand, if you're completely new to this, you've just been following the standard American diet, you're eating a lot of bread, pasta, chips, cookies, candy, cereal, and you snack multiple times during the day, then there's definitely going to be an adaptation period of 2 to 8 weeks where you might feel, or you're definitely going to feel crummy at first when you start fasting. That's actually perfectly normal. Your body, think about it, is literally going through carb withdrawals. But we can shorten that period to just 21 days by doing a complete reset. I like to call it the 21-day primal reset, where we just kind of go back to our roots on how we're supposed to eat. We do a complete purge of your pantry and we start stocking it with the right foods. That's step number one. You want to put yourself in the best position to succeed. And then you want to start making supportive lifestyle choices that upregulate your fat burning metabolism, which will then turn you into a fat burning machine after just 21 days. Because you need to have a multifaceted approach to this. Because 80% of your body composition is determined by your diet, while the other 20% is determined by your genetic predisposition to store fat and making supportive lifestyle choices. So yes, your genetics actually plays a role in this. During your own 21-day reset, intermittent fasting should actually just be optional, because that's like step number 10 in all of this. You need to learn how to walk first before you can run. It's not just about going from 0 to 100 here. And that's why a lot of people fail. It's about going from 0 to 1. You need to establish a baseline first that you can work with, hence the 21-day reset. Again, this is also where you take the time to learn how to make supportive lifestyle choices geared towards fat loss, like proper sleep hygiene, managing your stress levels, incorporating movement throughout the day, and doing proper workouts that promote fat burning. Because there's actually a right way and a wrong way to exercise. That's why you see so many people, they spend countless hours at the gym, but they look the same. They have the right intention, but the wrong execution. They're doing the wrong types of workouts, and it's actually hindering their weight loss progress. Imagine that. You think you're doing the right thing by going to the gym 7 days a week, but you're actually not. I told you, there's a right way and a wrong way to approach intermittent fasting, specifically fat loss. There are rules to this. It's definitely not just calories in versus calories out. Fun fact, did you know that calorie counting has a 99% failure rate? And if you've been struggling to lose weight all this time and that's been your method of weight loss, you already know that to be true. But hey, that's all about to change now. And starting with the 21-day reset is a great baseline for a lot of people, because they say that it takes 21 days to make or break a habit. And it's easy to wrap your head around committing to something for 21 days. After that, you've just formed a new healthy habit, and then it just gets easier. After you've done a proper 21-day reset, the end result should be now you're metabolically flexible, you're fat adapted, and you can easily switch fuel sources from the foods that you eat to your own body fat for energy. That's when you get into what I like to call accelerated fat loss. Because it's not about eating less, but less frequently. There is a world of difference between those two things. That's why you see those people who only eat like 1,000 calories every day. They eat their 6 small meals and they're not losing weight. If you don't do a proper reset and you're still following a standard American diet and you just jump right into intermittent fasting, that is the definition of metabolic inflexibility. Your body is simply not ready for it, and I can almost guarantee you that you're not going to see the results you're looking for. And this is where a lot of people find themselves. This is where you hear people say, oh, I got headaches. They say they were starving all the time. They had no energy. They didn't feel good. And they'll say, oh, it just didn't work for them. I could have told you that. Now, the people who's taken the proper 21-day reset have all successfully upregulated their fat-burning metabolism. They're metabolically flexible and they can easily fast for long periods of time without feeling hungry, which means that they're able to burn more body fat. They've also all been successful at keeping the weight off, and that's key. Here's David, one of my students that I mentioned earlier, and this is how he looks 1 year later after taking the program. This is a text from Ange, one of my other students, 7 months after taking the Fat Loss Accelerator. She's now a fat burning machine. Intermittent fasting works. It's just a matter of doing it properly. Now, how long will it take for you to start seeing results? It really depends how long you fast for and how often. I always like to say that the longer you fast, the better. It also depends how much fasting your body can handle at any given time, which is dependent whether your body is fat adapted and you're metabolically flexible. Again, that is the key to all of this. It also depends if you do intermittent fasting every day or you just do it a few times during the week. It also depends how much you're eating during your eating window and how many cheat meals you take during the week. And I've found that if you're metabolically flexible, if you're fat adapted, and again, you can achieve that by doing a proper 21-day reset, and then when you start doing intermittent fasting, it's like being able to turn on the tap to fat loss. You become an unstoppable fat-burning beast. If you do intermittent fasting, but you're not fat adapted, and you're not metabolically flexible, it can actually start having a negative effect on your body because you're going to be introducing a type of stress that your body is not well equipped to handle. Because again, you're metabolically inflexible. You're going to be triggering your fight or flight response, and if you do that too much, you're going to have chronically high cortisol levels, and chronic stress is one of the biggest killers of weight loss. The other thing that you want to consider is how long you've been carrying all that extra weight that you're trying to lose. Again, intermittent fasting is an unbelievably powerful method of weight loss, but it's not an overnight fix. So if you've been overweight for a long time, that means that you've also been insulin resistant for a long time. So it might take a little bit of time to lower your insulin levels. So you need to be realistic about your goals. That's why it is paramount that you pair it with the proper diet. It just goes back to making sure that your body is fat adapted and you're metabolically flexible first so you can make the switch to burning your own body fat once you're done eating. The biggest thing that I want you to take away here is that whatever your weight loss goal is, it's going to take some time. But again, you can do certain things to make that process a lot easier and a lot smoother. Let me give you some realistic numbers. If you do intermittent fasting properly, it's not unusual to lose anywhere between 1.5 to 2 pounds of fat per week. Some people lose more, but again, I want you to focus on fat loss, not weight loss. If you give it 12 weeks or 3 months, for example, at a rate of 2 pounds of fat loss per week, that is 24 pounds of fat gone forever. That's life-changing. If you don't know what losing 25 pounds of fat looks like, here's one of my other students. She lost exactly 25 pounds of fat in 12 weeks without exercise, which makes it even more impressive because she did everything else right. That's how effective intermittent fasting can be if you do it properly. And if you want to know how to put this all together, then keep watching. So now that you know some baseline numbers and how to do intermittent fasting properly, let's get into the troubleshooting side of things. Because mistakes are part of the process. If you're not making mistakes, you're not trying. So here are the top 5 reasons why you're not losing weight with intermittent fasting and what you need to do instead so you can finally get that needle moving in the right direction. Okay, let's start with the most obvious one. Don't feel bad if this is you. This is very common for a lot of people. You're simply still eating too much, especially too much of the bad stuff. You fast for however long you decided to fast, but after that, all bets are off. During your eating window, it becomes a free-for-all. This is honestly one of the biggest mistakes I see time and time again why people aren't losing weight. Yes, intermittent fasting is one of the best tools to have at your disposal when it comes to improving your health and reaching your fat loss goals, but it's just that. It's just a tool. It's not a magic bullet. Like more than anything, it's an extremely easy way to put yourself on a calorie deficit because you're eating less frequently. It's also an unbelievably effective way to moderate insulin, which is your storing hormone. When insulin is low, it allows you to tap into your almost unlimited fat stores and burn it for energy. But that doesn't just happen overnight, especially if you've been overweight for a long time. You develop something called insulin resistance. You need to practice intermittent fasting long enough, and that's another mistake in itself, where you're just impatient while pairing it with a diet that moderates your insulin levels to reverse it. Eventually, you'll get to a point where you become metabolically flexible. Metabolic flexibility is when you can easily tap into your fat stores and burn it for energy in between meals. But if your diet is average at best, you're still eating a lot of refined carbs and sugar, it's only going to be a matter of time until you hit the dreaded weight loss plateau. You're basically counteracting all the benefits you just got from intermittent fasting. Eating junk promotes metabolic inflexibility. You're basically taking one step forward from fasting, but 2 steps back because of your diet. What you eat and when you eat are equally important when it comes to losing weight. Intermittent fasting takes care of the when you eat part, but you also have to start optimizing the what you eat part of the equation. Don't eat like an asshole. Yes, I've talked a lot about how to lose fat without counting calories on my channel. It's entirely possible to do it, but this is also when having some sort of an idea how much you're actually eating by tracking your macros can be really helpful. Remember, what gets measured gets controlled. Number 2, you're drinking unnecessary healthy liquid calories. Consuming liquid calories is one of the fastest ways to derail any weight loss effort. This also includes healthier options like juice, fruit smoothies, green juice, and coconut water. It doesn't matter that they contain electrolytes and vitamins. You can get your vitamins and minerals from better sources like meat. When you eat fruit in its unprocessed form, fruit will naturally contain fiber, which slows down the absorption and give you some level of satiety because your body has to physically digest the fruit. But if you consume it in its juice form, it basically becomes rocket fuel. Most of the fiber gets taken out and you're basically just drinking liquid sugar at that point. If you blend fruit, it makes it a lot easier for your body to break down because there's not a lot of digestion necessary. And because it's so easy to break down once it enters your system, those sugars are really going to be quickly absorbed in your bloodstream, causing a huge spike in blood glucose with a corresponding spike in insulin. Which brings me to my next point. Sugar, in case you didn't know, is one of the most insulinogenic types of food on the planet, which means it causes a huge spike in insulin. Again, one of the proven benefits of intermittent fasting is improved insulin sensitivity because you're just not eating as much. Remember, every time you eat, your insulin goes up. When you're not eating, insulin stays low and you activate your built-in fat burning mechanism. It only makes sense that when you break your fast, you want to do your best to still keep insulin moderated by only drinking and eating foods that are insulinogenic or lipogenic. Again, what spikes insulin the most? Carbs and refined sugar, like, I don't know, liquid calories. So don't sabotage yourself. Plus, drinking juice and fruit smoothies just promotes overconsumption. A normal human being, for example, would only eat 1 orange or an apple in one sitting, right? But if you buy even like a tiny bottle of juice, it'll say it contains 5 oranges. That's not a good thing. Like, who the heck eats 5 oranges in one sitting? The problem is it's not satiating at all because it's already been processed and it only contains sugar at that point. Same thing when you get a smoothie from a place like Jamba Juice. Like a small orange supreme smoothie has the same amount of sugar as a can of Coke. If you really want to eat fruit, stick to low sugar types of fruit like berries and avocado and only eat fruits that are in season. Number 3, you're still eating frequently during your eating window. Again, every time you eat, assuming that it's a blend of carbs, fat, and protein, your insulin goes up. Your body goes into fat storing mode, which means that if you eat frequently during your eating window, you're constantly going to be secreting insulin, which keeps you in fat storing mode. Eating frequently is also a sign that you're not eating satiating meals, because if you were, you should easily be able to go 3 to 4 hours in between meals. It also comes down to a numbers game. The more frequently you eat, the higher your chances are of over-consuming and end up being on a calorie surplus. If you want to lose weight, you need to be on a calorie deficit while keeping insulin, cortisol, and other important hormones moderated. Plus, we usually don't snack on the healthiest stuff. We snack on chips, cookies, crackers, trail mix, granola bars, protein bars, and designer coffee, again, which are all extremely insulinogenic. They're all processed and contain sugar. Ideally, you just want to aim for 2 to 3 highly satiating meals during your eating window. This is why I always say that there are other fun and interesting things to do in life rather than stuffing your face with food every time you're bored. Number 4, you're not eating enough protein. I have to mention this because I see a lot of people commenting on my videos asking why they're not losing weight with intermittent fasting, but worse, they're starting to lose their hair. This is why it's crucial that you prioritize getting enough protein in your diet, because the amino acids in protein becomes the building blocks that your body uses to build itself from within. Protein and fat are essential to the human body. You would die without it. Fun fact, There are no essential carbs. Your body, being the amazing thing that it is, can actually make its own glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis. Tell that to your bro or trainer who still insists that you need to carb load before your workout. Going back to prioritizing satiety when you eat, if you eat meat, you'll automatically get a combination of fat and protein. Protein and fat are the most satiating macronutrients. They're also delicious. Protein activates peptide YY or PYY, and fat activates cholecystokinin or CCK, which are key satiety hormones. The bioavailability from animal protein is also far superior than getting your protein from plants. In fact, eating mostly animals is so effective at turning off hunger and producing some pretty fascinating weight loss transformations that an elimination diet like the carnivore diet has gained a lot more popularity lately. But it's not a fad diet. Some would even say that a carnivore-ish or a mostly carnivore diet is the original human diet. You won't find a short list of testimonials from people who swear by it, especially when it comes to reversing autoimmune disease. You'll usually hear people say that they fix their allergies, eczema, arthritis, and completely transform their bodies and their lives by going on a carnivore diet. That's kind of hard to ignore. In fact, I've recently switched back to a mostly carnivore diet since I moved to Mexico, mostly out of necessity because I don't have a full kitchen here to cook vegetables. I'm also really lazy, so I just buy cooked meat. And you know what? I love it. I feel amazing. Best believe I'm getting enough protein through this diet. If you're wondering how much protein you need, the general rule is you want to eat 0.7 grams per pound of lean body mass. For example, a 200-pound man at 20% body fat would have a lean body mass of 160 pounds, which means he would need to eat a minimum of 112 grams of protein to maintain and build muscle. If you play sports, or you're really active, or if you're pregnant, you generally get to eat more. You can go as high as 1 gram per pound of lean body mass, or even a little bit more. Going back to our previous example, that person would need to eat at least 160 grams of protein every day. But that 0.7 multiplier is the bare minimum for protein. If you don't meet that criteria, that's when your body starts to think that it's in a state of famine. It goes into survival mode. It starts to prioritize more important functions like keeping your heart pumping and your organs functioning properly. That's why people start losing their hair, because technically you can go without hair. It's not essential to keep you alive. Also, losing fat is going to be pretty low on your body's priority of things to do, because your body's actually going to want to hold on to your fat stores because that's your fuel reserve. A really easy way to get more protein in your diet is to just eat more eggs. Eggs are one of the most nutritious foods on the planet. It's basically nature's version of a multivitamin. I personally eat at least 3 to 4 eggs a day. And I love using this example. Sean Baker, a doctor who's really big in the carnivore diet space, claims to eat close to 100 eggs a week. And he looks like that. He's obviously doing something right. Also, don't worry too much about getting your protein in right away after your workout, especially if you work out first thing in the morning, but don't break your fast until noon. So you resort to drinking a protein shake because you're worried about the anabolic window. That is a myth. As long as you get enough protein at some point during the day and you get enough of it, you're fine. But that's the biggest selling point for protein powder companies. By the way, if you drink a protein shake during your fasting window, that automatically breaks your fast. Some people think otherwise because they're not eating solid food, but that's a mistake. Again, anything that activates your digestion or anything that tastes sweet, even though it's 0 calories, will break your fast. Plus, protein powders are typically high in sugar or artificial sweeteners. But if you eat real food like meat and eggs, it's also going to contain some fat while giving you protein, which keeps you satiated longer. Plus, there's also the thermic effect of protein from eating real food. 30% of the calories in animal protein is burned through digestion. So 100 calories of meat only gives you 70 calories net total. This is why I always say that not all calories are created equal. Number 5, you're inadvertently breaking your fast. I kind of brushed on this already, but it bears repeating and explaining. Other than eating too much, this is the biggest culprit for a lot of people why they're not losing weight with intermittent fasting. And I still see this in the comments of a lot of my videos where people ask if they can drink this or eat that while they're fasting. The short answer is no. And that is not the right type of mindset you should be in. Fasting is all about taking a break from eating and giving your body a chance to use your fat stores for energy. It's not about trying to see what you can get away with and, cheating the system. You're only going to be cheating yourself, and you're going to be severely disappointed with your results or lack thereof. The only things you're allowed to have during your fast are water, soda water or seltzer water, black coffee, or tea. That is it. Drinking diet soda, using artificial sweeteners in your coffee, or drinking fruity types of tea will break your fast. And I used to be guilty of this. This is also a big aha moment for a lot of my students. For the longest time, I put stevia in my coffee. I thought it was a better option than Splenda because it was natural. I was also stuck. I couldn't seem to lose those last 5 pounds. I also struggled big time with hunger pangs during my fast. I was miserable. That is until I read about something called the cephalic phase insulin response, or CPIR. It's your body's physiological reaction whenever it tastes something sweet like artificial sweeteners. It doesn't matter that it's 0 calories. Your body starts to think that you're about to eat. Your brain, being the supercomputer that it is, then starts to send a signal to your pancreas to start producing insulin in anticipation of all the food that's coming. The problem is, there is no food. Not only have you inadvertently broken your fast by triggering an insulin response by using stevia, but you also now have to deal with stronger hunger pangs because you've just confused your body by giving it the signal that you're about to eat. If you really want to optimize fat loss from intermittent fasting, you want to stick to what a lot of experts call a true fast or a clean fast. No cheating this system. It also makes it so much easier to fast if you do things the right way. The only small exception here is adding a tiny splash of heavy cream to your coffee. This is really helpful if you can't drink your coffee black. It's not the end of the world because pure fat has little to no effect on your insulin levels. Now, if you've hit the dreaded weight loss plateau, here are 3 ways to get out of it so you can start losing weight again. Tip number 1 is take out the training wheels. Don't have anything during your fast. What I mean by that is you want to have a 0 tolerance policy during your fasting window. I'm talking about putting butter or MCT oil in your coffee first thing in the morning, drinking pre-workout or BCAA before your workout, even though it's labeled as 0 calories, or drinking diet soda or really any 0 calorie drink but is artificially sweetened during your fasting window. So let's talk about each one of those real quick. I'm not saying that putting butter or MCT oil in your coffee, also known as bulletproof coffee, is bad for you. In fact, it can help you even get fat adapted faster. It's called doing a fat fast. It's where you're consuming some fat during your fasting window. And this is actually really helpful for some people, especially if you're new to this, because pure fat doesn't have a lot of effect on your insulin levels, and you're still getting most of the benefits of intermittent fasting because it still keeps you in ketosis. It's kind of a training wheel for absolute beginners, but it's exactly just that. It's a training wheel. What I mean by that is if you've hit a weight loss plateau, keep in mind that butter and MCT oil still contains calories. A standard bulletproof coffee recipe, for example, contains something like 440 calories. So let's do some math here. Let's say you round that up to 500 calories, just to make the math a little easy here. Let's say you're putting a little extra butter in your coffee. So if you drink bulletproof coffee every day in a span of a week, that is about 3,500 calories. So 500 calories times 7 days. Now, 1 pound of fat approximately contains 3,500 calories as well. What that means simply is that if you're drinking bulletproof coffee every day, you are potentially stopping yourself from losing an extra pound of fat every week. And that could be the difference between you being stuck versus you breaking that weight loss plateau. Now let's talk about pre-workout and BCAA. Let's say you take that stuff before or during your workout because your bro told you that it's okay because it's 0 calories. Or again, you're drinking a can of diet soda or anything that's branded as 0 calories but is artificially sweetened. And this includes, unfortunately, stevia, by the way. All those things that I just mentioned will inadvertently break your fast because it's gonna trigger the cephalic response in your body when you take it. So when you drink that stuff, your body tastes something sweet. So it sends signals to your pancreas to start producing insulin in anticipation of the food that's coming in because there's something sweet in your mouth. But there's actually no food in your mouth. You're just drinking liquid that's supposed to be 0 calories. So now your brain gets confused and it's gonna send even stronger hunger signals. It's gonna send even stronger hunger pangs. And at the same time, you've just broken your fast because again, you just triggered an insulin response. And you've just switched your body from fat burning mode to fat storage mode, even though you're not eating. Does that make sense? This is why drinking diet soda is one of the worst things that you can do when you're doing intermittent fasting. Same goes for drinking anything that's 0 calories, but it's artificially sweetened. It's a one-way ticket to hitting a weight loss plateau. You're selling yourself short and you're not getting the full effects of fasting just because you're drinking this stuff. Now, let's say you're staying true to your fast, you're not taking anything, you're just drinking water, soda water, tea, or black coffee. But unfortunately, you're still stuck. The next step then becomes we need to start looking at what you're consuming during your eating window. And that's tip number 2. Track your food. Listen, calories still matter when you're intermittent fasting. Like, fasting is awesome. It's extremely powerful when it comes to weight loss, but it doesn't give you the green light to hit up your local all-you-can-eat buffet during your eating window. And a lot of people can get away with not tracking their food, especially when they're just starting out. And this is especially true if you're used to eating 6 meals a day and then you compress that to just an 8-hour eating window. But you can still eat a lot of food in that 8-hour eating window, especially if you're still snacking or you're eating a lot of fat bombs or keto bombs. And if you've hit the dreaded weight loss plateau and you haven't been tracking your food, then this is something that you need to start doing because you can't control what you can't measure. And you don't need to track your food every day. I don't track my food every day, but you need to have a general idea of what you're putting in your body and how much specifically. Awareness is key in a lot of things in life, but this is especially true once you've hit a plateau. And this doesn't have to be rocket science. Just start by writing all the foods that you're eating, and then you want to use an online food tracker to log in your food. And I personally use a free app called MyFitnessPal. And if you've never tracked your food before, this is gonna be an eye-opening experience for you. Again, I'm not a big fan of obsessing over every single gram of food you put in your body, but the other side of that is just because something is labeled as healthy doesn't mean that you can go to town on it. Cheese and nuts are great snacks, for example, especially if you're replacing chips, cookies, candy, or whatever your caloric kryptonite is. But if you eat too much of it, or if you just eat too much food in general, that's gonna put you in a caloric surplus. And if you add a surplus, you're not gonna lose weight. And that's kind of weight loss 101 here. If you want to lose weight, you need to be at a caloric deficit. That statement will always be true, but you need to know that you're at an actual deficit, and it starts again by tracking your food. Again, intermittent fasting is, in my opinion, the best method of weight loss on the planet, bar none, because one of its main benefits is that it lowers your insulin levels, which then gives you access to your almost unlimited fat stores for energy. Like, at any given time, you have about 100,000 calories worth of stored energy in the form of body fat waiting to be used. And you get access to it when you fast. But you can easily cancel that out by eating too much during your eating window. And that's another thing worth mentioning, is that you want to do your best to pair intermittent fasting with a diet that moderates your insulin levels. So if you've hit a weight loss plateau, you want to look at the foods that you're eating. If you're still eating a lot of carbs, for example, one of the fastest ways to break a plateau is by limiting the amount of carbs in your diet. Because again, carbs, especially refined carbs, spike your hormone insulin the most. So if you're still eating whole wheat bread or brown rice, you want to start limiting those things, because it doesn't matter that it's healthier. I mean, they're not. Because your body still has to produce the same amount of insulin to process it. And if you're having digestive problems, you really want to start limiting grains because of its high anti-nutrient content. And it's the same thing with low carb options, like low carb crackers, for example. Why? Because you're still eating processed food. Listen, the more processing your food goes through, the higher the insulin response. And again, your job, if you want to lose weight and break your weight loss plateau, is to moderate the insulin response from the foods that you eat. So you want to replace those excess carbs and processed foods with green leafy vegetables. Eat cauliflower rice instead of brown rice. Did you know that cauliflower rice has 800% fewer carbs than regular rice? Amazing, right? And then you want to start eating healthier snack options, like a couple of squares of 85% dark chocolate, for example. And more likely than not, if you do those things, you're gonna break your weight loss plateau. Guys, if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button to help this video reach more people. Okay, if those first two tips still doesn't work, then we can move on to tip number 3. And this might be the most powerful one of them all. I saved the best for last. So if you're still at a weight loss plateau after following tips 1 and 2, so you're good during your fasting window and you're tracking your calories, the next lever we can adjust is your fasting window. So whatever your current fasting window is, I want you to add 4 hours to it. For example, if you're completely new to this and you're eating 3 meals a day, so you're balanced, you have a 12-hour eating window and a 12-hour fasting window, then it's time to graduate and it's time to actually start doing intermittent fasting. So you're going from a 12-hour fasting window to now, you had 4 hours, you're now doing a 16-hour fasting window. If you're currently doing a 16-hour fast, so add 4 hours to that, it's time to level up. So now you're gonna be doing a 20-hour fast. So more of a warrior style diet. And the effectiveness of this tip is based on my own personal experience and the results of all my students. Because the power of intermittent fasting lies in not eating less, but less frequently. Again, let me repeat, it's not about eating less, but less frequently. When I started out, for example, I used to do a 16-hour fast and I got good results. But then I switched to a 20-hour fasting window eating the same calories, I got even better results. When I switched to a 24-hour fast, that was when I got the best results, and I've been able to maintain those results ever since. The longer you fast, the better, because you're giving your body more time to lower your insulins and tap into your fat stores for energy. And this is especially true if you've been overweight or obese for a really long time. You need to give your body a little extra time to lower your insulin levels. So even extending your fast to like 36 hours or even 48 hours will do wonders to someone who's hit a weight loss plateau. Again, this is especially true, and I can't emphasize this enough. If you've been overweight, if you've been struggling to lose weight for a long time, because that means that you're extremely insulin resistant. You gotta put in a little extra work. Again, remember, that's what body fat is there for. It's not just there for looks. And as mentioned earlier, you have about 100,000 calories worth of stored energy. So it's time to use it. And this is where voluntary hardship comes in, by the way, and it's rarely ever talked about. Guys, losing weight isn't easy. If it was, everyone would be skinny. Everyone would be walking around with a six-pack. But that's why it's so much more gratifying. It's so much more rewarding when you actually stick to it, when you actually see this through. And that's where voluntary hardship comes in. And you don't have to stay in this new fasting window, by the way. You just want to break the weight loss plateau. Because again, based on my personal experience and the results of all my students, it's so much easier to maintain weight than to lose it. But you have to get to that maintenance weight first. And if you follow all the tips I just mentioned in this video, you're going to be well on your way to breaking that weight loss plateau and get that scale moving in the right direction. And if you still need help, keep watching. Next up, let's talk about some things you should not do when intermittent fasting for long-term adherence. Again, there are rules. Now we're getting into sustainability, which is crucial for your long-term success. You don't want to lose weight initially, but you end up putting it back on because you can't maintain what you're doing. Sustainability is a big problem for a lot of people. The first one is not being flexible with your intermittent fasting schedule. So we are all creatures of habits. I get that. We like a routine. But some people like to crystallize and immortalize the intermittent fasting schedule that they follow. They identify with it and then they don't really want to try other things. And it's kind of the same thing with diet, right? So you've got the vegan community, the keto followers, the paleo followers, all the way down to people who follow the carnivore diet. And it's kind of the same thing with people who follow intermittent fasting. So you've got the lean gains crowd, so the 16-hour fasting crowd. You've got the warrior diet crowd, you've got the OMAD crowd. So these people, they identify with a fasting schedule and they don't really veer away from it. But that can be a double-edged sword. The problem with that is if you're not flexible with your fasting schedule, you're actually closing yourself to possibly getting even better results. Because being flexible with your intermittent fasting schedule is an unbelievably powerful way to break through a weight loss plateau. Yes, weight loss plateaus happen with intermittent fasting as well. And there are many factors that contribute to a weight loss plateau. Like how much sleep are you getting every night? What kind of diet are you following? How much stress are you dealing with in your life right now? What kind of foods are you eating? I'm talking about the quality of the foods that you're eating. What type of workouts do you do? Right? Like there are many factors, but one of the best ways to break it is by being flexible with your intermittent fasting schedule because you have control over that. For example, for the longest time when I was just starting out with this, I followed the lean gains method. So I was doing a 16-hour fast for the longest time. And I got good results from it. And then I started adding a 24-hour fast once a week. I got even better results. And then I started dabbling with the warrior diet. I got good results from that. And then now I'm following more of a 1 meal a day type of eating for 5 days during the week. And then the other 2 days, I'll do either warrior or even 16 hours if I go for brunch. And if you've been following my channel, you'll know that I've also dabbled with doing an extended fast. I've done a 48-hour fast, a 3-day fast, all the way down to a 7-day water fast. I even tried dry fasting, which is absolutely wild. And I've been doing intermittent fasting for 8 years. And this type of flexibility is what's allowed me to thrive and maintain my results from living this type of lifestyle. All my students, same thing. What I'm trying to say is it's okay to switch up your fasting schedule. And think about it this way. When our Paleolithic ancestors would come across honey or seasonal berries, they wouldn't say, oh, sorry, I can't eat that. I'm still fasting. No, they would eat it. When they're hunting for animals, sometimes they would catch an animal first thing in the morning. Other days, they wouldn't catch one until the afternoon. Some days, they wouldn't catch an animal at all, and they would be forced to do an overnight fast. Do you know what I mean? Like, that sounds an awful lot like the intermittent fasting schedule flexibility that I'm talking about here. Number 2, you're not being flexible with your meal times. Now, this sounds kind of similar to not being flexible with your intermittent fasting schedule, but this one deserves its own point. So a lot of people who do intermittent fasting fall in love with eating at night, especially if you do a warrior diet or a 1 meal a day diet. You naturally just tend to eat at night. But keep in mind that that is not set in stone at all, by any means. And I've kind of developed a rap as the anti-breakfast guy, but that's not true. I love breakfast food. I also love brunch. I sound super basic when I say that. Now, personally, my schedule just works out in a way that it's better for me to eat around dinner time as my only meal, especially again when I do a warrior diet or one meal a day, just because I'm busy throughout the day. But again, that's not set in stone. Listen, adherence is everything when it comes to your success with intermittent fasting. And I always say that the best intermittent fasting schedule is the one that you can follow. The best meal time is also the one that you can follow. If, for example, it's better for you to eat breakfast and lunch and skip dinner, that's still intermittent fasting. If you do OMAD and you want your one meal to be around breakfast time, then do that. That still counts as the OMAD diet. The point that I'm trying to make is there's nothing inherently wrong with eating breakfast, eating around breakfast time, especially if you're eating nutrient-dense foods. And again, this goes back to our Paleolithic ancestors in that sometimes they would catch an animal first thing in the morning, or they would come across honey or berries first thing in the morning. They didn't say, sorry, it's not time to eat yet. They would just eat it, and then sometimes they wouldn't find food for the rest of the day. And I always like to mention the Paleolithic way of life in basically every single one of my videos, because that is how we evolved as human beings. We evolved 2.5 million years ago, which means that our genes on a genetic level evolved a certain way for 2.5 million years. And today, we're still genetically identical to our Paleolithic ancestors. And it's important to note that because our Paleolithic ancestors were all naturally lean and strong. They also didn't suffer from the modern disease of civilization like obesity, diabetes, cancer, and cardiovascular disease. So it's really all about modeling our eating pattern as close to our Paleolithic ancestors as possible. And this advice goes against conventional wisdom, right? From the bro science community of eating 6 meals a day. But hey, now you know better. Now, let's talk about the potential cons of intermittent fasting. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It's not gonna be all puppies and rainbows to start. It's probably gonna suck at first. And it's really mostly because we've taught our bodies to expect food at certain times during the day. Like, I don't know, eating first thing in the morning. But did you know that there's actually no science that proves that eating first thing in the morning is somehow beneficial to the human body? None. The term breakfast is the most important meal of the day. It's just a marketing ploy. It's completely made up by food companies. Like, the word breakfast literally means break fast. It's the meal that breaks your overnight fast, which means you get to decide when you eat your breakfast. So there's no rule that says that you have to eat first thing in the morning. You can have your breakfast at noon. And think about it this way, like when you start fasting, you are going against a lifetime of eating habits. There's definitely gonna be an adaptation period. So start slow, especially if you're new, you're most likely not metabolically flexible yet. I would even go as far as saying that you shouldn't start with intermittent fasting. Again, there are levels to this. If you're someone who's got really bad eating habits and where your diet is complete junk, you need to fix that first, like work on that. That's when you can effectively use a tool like the keto diet or a low carb diet in general as a tool to achieve metabolic flexibility. And no, you don't have to stay on the keto diet forever. You can just use it as a tool. Carbs aren't necessarily bad as long as you're eating whole foods. But if you start intermittent fasting when your diet is still an absolute dumpster fire, that's like signing up for a marathon when your only form of exercise all this time is just going back and forth to the fridge. It's probably not gonna go very well. And this is what happens all the time. Like, a lot of people start intermittent fasting because they find out how awesome it is. So they do it, but they don't really adjust their diet. And the average adult following the standard American diet consumes 60% of their calories from ultra-processed foods. So when they fast, they get really hungry, they get headaches, they feel fatigued, they have no energy, they have the worst time doing it, so they quit. And then they say it didn't work for them. So again, fix your diet first. Focus on nutrient density. Prioritize protein for satiety and building and maintaining muscle. More importantly, you need to stop eating highly palatable, vegetable oil-laced, ultra-processed foods. That single dietary shift alone will make you lose a ton of weight. Next, not everyone's results will be the same. This is where bio-individuality comes into play. Let me give you some real talk. Your genetic predisposition to store fat plays a key role when it comes to your results, meaning if you come from an obese family, it might take a little bit longer to move that weight loss needle in the right direction. It also depends how long you've been holding onto the fat that you're trying to lose. Like if you're an obese kid, for example, you can bet that someone who's been overweight for 8 years is gonna lose that weight in a different rate than someone who's been overweight for 8 months, like if you got pregnant. I'm just being brutally honest with you here. You need to have the right expectations. Men, for some reason, also tend to lose more weight than women, especially at the beginning. It takes a little bit of time to flip that metabolic switch, but best believe that it's gonna happen eventually. It's just not gonna happen overnight. If you do things properly, you can be metabolically flexible again in 3 to 6 weeks. And again, if you just want a proven step-by-step plan and work with me, make sure to check out the link somewhere at the top or in the description below. You can book a free consultation to join my coaching program. Next up, intermittent fasting can be used as an overcompensation tool. Again, intermittent fasting can be a great tool at your disposal to give yourself some caloric flexibility when it comes to having the occasional treat. But this isn't a give an inch, take a mile scenario. You can't do intermittent fasting and eat fast food every day. It doesn't work like that. You have to be sensible about this. Next up, a lot of people are guilty of this. You can definitely fast the wrong way. This is the all too familiar fasting trap that a lot of people find themselves in. What I mean by that is some people think that because something is good for them, that automatically means that more is better. In terms of the length of the fast, the benefits really start to taper off after 48 hours. And I don't even recommend doing 48 hours because that will definitely start to affect your social life. Unless you're in the morbidly obese category, I would stick to a 24-hour fast as your longest fast so you can still have a life. In terms of what you eat, less isn't necessarily better. Yes, you still need to be on a calorie deficit when you're fasting. Only this time, it's actually going to work in a more sustainable way because you're also factoring in hormones. What you don't want to do is double down and severely undereat during your feeding window. You don't want your metabolism to tank in this process. Again, revolve your diet around nutrient-dense foods and prioritize protein. Now, as powerful and beneficial intermittent fasting is for fat loss and improving your overall health, unfortunately, it's not safe for everyone. Next up, I'm going to show you certain types of people who should not fast. Let's start with the controversial one. You should not do intermittent fasting if you're currently overdoing it. And a lot of people are guilty of this. The key to making intermittent fasting work, especially in the long term, is actually in the name itself. You need to fast intermittently. Intermittent means occurring at irregular times, not continuous or steady. Truth be told, I used to be one of those purists with the mentality that more is always better. But just like with a lot of things, you can definitely have too much of a good thing. This can be seen in an 8-week study of an 8-hour feeding window, and they saw a significant decline in testosterone. And that just doesn't apply to men. Women need testosterone as well. A few years ago, I did OMAD every day for about a year. At first, I got amazing results. I got super lean, but eventually it started to affect me negatively. My testosterone wasn't optimal. I was always cold. I had cramping problems. It started to affect my sleep. It made so much sense after seeing that study. And it's actually a pretty easy fix. Just change it up. Be inconsistent with your fasting schedule. For example, on weekdays, maybe do a 16 or 18-hour fast. And then on weekends, maybe have breakfast or brunch with your family and operate on a 12 or 14-hour eating window. I mean, that's what I do these days. On Sundays, I'll have some pancakes made out of sprouted grains with some sliced banana drizzled with raw and organic honey. And my body is so much happier because of it. Maybe throw in the occasional 24-hour fast once every couple of weeks, especially if you know you're having a big meal that night. You can save all your calories for that one meal. There's even new studies that for women, doing intermittent fasting just 3 days a week is enough to get them benefits. And here's the kicker. You also want to do an occasional fast from fasting. Yep, you heard that right. Like, take a break from it. Obviously, you still want to eat a proper diet when you do this, but it's okay to take a break from it every once in a while. To me, that sounds way more sustainable. Number 2, you should not do intermittent fasting if you have an eating disorder. In fact, you should do the complete opposite of fasting. You should focus on nourishing your body and mind. The reason is pretty simple. Food is the remedy for anorexia nervosa. Seeing a therapist might help as well, so you can have someone guide you when it comes to improving your relationship with food and yourself. And while we're in this topic, you shouldn't fast if you're malnourished or you're underweight. Like, you can't subsist on 1,000 calories a day. Focus on food quality. Food quality is directly tied to brain neurochemistry, by the way. And we'll talk about which foods I'm referring to in a second here. Number 3, you shouldn't do intermittent fasting if you're a teenager. Adequate nutrition is required for proper growth. This is especially true for kids going through a growth spurt. You shouldn't even be thinking about fasting at this point. Listen, missing a meal here and there isn't a bad thing. Let's say you sleep in on weekends and you miss breakfast. That's fine. So if you're a teenager who's watching this, or you're a parent, or you have a sibling who's a teenager, I know how important it is to have a positive body image at that age, because kids are savages, like they have no filter. Trust me, I know. I used to get bullied when I was a kid. I think it's more important to teach kids how to make proper food choices instead of thinking about intermittent fasting to lose weight. And if you want to get rid of excess body fat, here's a very simple plan you can use. Avoid industrial seed oils, aka vegetable oils, as if your life depends on it. Toss them out. You can cook with coconut oil or butter instead. And make sure to read labels because this stuff is everywhere. You can even find it in baby formula. Don't drink liquid calories, avoid refined carbs and refined sugar, as well as artificial sweeteners. Eat the least toxic plants. Yep, you heard that right. All plants exist in a spectrum of toxicity. Kale is not your friend. Lastly, get adequate protein from animals and animal products. And if you want a step-by-step plan, make sure to download the Lean Body Blueprint by clicking on the link at the top right-hand corner or in the description below. It's completely free. Number 4, you shouldn't do intermittent fasting if you're pregnant. I mean, this should be obvious, like there's a human being growing inside of you, which means that whatever you eat, the baby also eats. Which also means that if you don't eat anything, like if you do intermittent fasting, well, the baby also doesn't eat anything. That is not a good thing for a developing fetus that requires adequate nutrients for optimal growth. And any deficiency may cause irreversible damage. I mean, you shouldn't even be thinking about losing weight at this point. What you should be focusing on is properly nourishing your body during pregnancy. Revolve your diet around single ingredient, mostly processed, nutrient-dense foods. And again, avoid seed oils and refined carbs. Eat organs, meat, fruit, and raw and organic honey, the most sought-after foods in human history. Extra bonus points if you consume organ meat like grass-fed and grass-finished beef liver. It's widely considered to be the most nutrient-dense and bioavailable food on the planet. It's the superfood of all superfoods. You get access to hard-to-find nutrients in its most bioavailable form, like copper, taurine, choline, vitamin K2, carnosine, carnitine, creatine, folate, glycine, and so much more. Hunter-gatherers like the Hadza in Tanzania treat the liver as the most prized part of the animal. Now, once the baby is born, you can get back into your intermittent fasting routine unless you're breastfeeding. This is just a little bit of continuity in that you shouldn't do intermittent fasting yet if you're nursing a baby. Again, the baby receives all the nutrients from you, the mom, through breast milk, so the baby eats what you eat. If you start fasting and you don't get the proper nutrients and minerals, guess what? Your baby won't receive it either. Again, possibly risking irreversible damage if you fast while you're breastfeeding. It's just not worth it. Again, it's okay to miss a meal here and there, but you shouldn't even be thinking about doing a 24 or 48-hour fast while breastfeeding. That's just silly. The good thing is breastfeeding is only temporary. Afterwards, you can start working on getting your pre-baby body back. Just like one of my coaching clients over here, she was able to drop her pregnancy weight, which was 80 pounds. Now, intermittent fasting isn't completely off the table for these next two types of people, but you should definitely consult with a knowledgeable health practitioner if you want to try it. And this is not medical advice, by the way. If you're taking any sort of medication, you should definitely consult with your doctor first if you want to do intermittent fasting. For the most part, you can still do intermittent fasting if you're taking any medication that needs to be taken with food, especially if you're just doing a short-term fast like a 16-hour fast, because you're technically not going the full day without food. Now, things get a little bit more serious if you're taking blood sugar medication. You need to consult with a medical professional if you have diabetes and you want to do intermittent fasting, because this can be life-threatening stuff. And the reason is pretty simple. One of the benefits of intermittent fasting is that it moderates insulin and blood sugar levels. That's a good thing. But if you also take blood sugar lowering medication like metformin on top of intermittent fasting, then you're possibly risking your body going into a state of hypoglycemia. Hypoglycemia is when your blood sugar gets too low, and it can be life-threatening. You need to ingest some sugar right away to reverse this life-threatening situation. The good thing is combining intermittent fasting with a low-carb diet is probably one of the best ways to reverse type 2 diabetes. But again, you need to work with a professional. Now, I mentioned the term knowledgeable health practitioner earlier for a reason. Make sure that your health practitioner, and it always puzzles me when I see overweight doctors or malnourished looking nutritionists, make sure they're up to date with the latest information on nutrition science. Let me make this clear. This is not about body shaming people. Again, I got fat shamed into working out when I was a teenager. But we need to be able to have an honest conversation about this. I mean, you wouldn't take financial advice from someone who's broke, right? The exact same thing goes with health professionals. That's why you should choose your health influencer wisely. For example, type 2 diabetes is not a chronic disease. It's completely reversible, like we're talking weeks. Again, this is not medical advice. Like if your doctor thinks otherwise, you need a new doctor. Preferably someone who's walking the talk and is up to date with nutrition science and isn't just satisfied to prescribe pills. You need to treat the root cause. I mean, check out Dr. Nick over here. His handle is the fittest doc. Or Dr. Paul Saladino, one of my favorites. His handle is Carnivore MD 2.0. Check out Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, who practices something called muscle-centric medicine. She's way ahead of the curve. Dr. Sean Baker is an absolute stud at 55. Dr. Lisa Weidman, check that out. She's 56. I would much rather listen to what those doctors have to say. I was watching a fellow YouTuber who's a nutritionist, and this person is big on intermittent fasting. But this person is rail thin. Like we're talking skin and bones. Most likely overdoing it with intermittent fasting. You gotta evolve your stance when presented with new information in this industry. That's why I'm completely off the bandwagon of the carbohydrate and insulin weight loss model. I eat organs, meat, fruit, and honey every day. I got my blood work done recently and everything looks great. I also cycle my intermittent fasting schedule. At 35 years old, I feel better now than when I was a competitive athlete in my 20s. Back to nutrition science, the US also recently dropped their guidelines on avoiding foods high in cholesterol. Bet you didn't see that on the news. I mean, cholesterol and saturated fat were wrongly vilified to begin with. They were never bad for you. There are many interventional studies to prove that. I mean, if cholesterol was so bad for you, why does your own body make its own cholesterol? You would die without it. In fact, the more saturated fat from grass-fed and grass-finished ruminant animals you include in your diet, the healthier you'll be. Fun fact, I actually have a few doctors in my online coaching program. At the end of the day, intermittent fasting is generally safe for most people, other than the 7 I just mentioned. And even then, there are levels. And again, there's nothing wrong with missing a meal here and there. Your body is well designed to handle it. Now, this next section is so important because I'm going to show you how to put this all together. This is the secret sauce. Let's assume that you've fixed your diet, you're metabolically flexible again, and you're working towards a 16-hour fast. But if for some reason you just don't have it that day, you're just not feeling it, you need to be nice to yourself and realize that if it's not working, it's okay if you just fasted for 12 hours, let's say, which is the bare minimum fast that does anything. You still get a growth hormone response benefit when you do a 12-hour fast. You're also hitting the minimum 12-hour digestive circadian clock to help prevent disease. You can always try again the next day. Like I said, a lot of people have the right intention by doing intermittent fasting, but they then combine it with the all too familiar no pain, no gain mentality, oftentimes disregarding other stressors in their life. And that is a big mistake. For example, you shouldn't push the fast if your sleep is trashed the night before, and then you did a crazy hard workout and you're not fully recovered, you're mentally and or emotionally drained from your relationship, or you're stressed from school, work, or a combination of all those things. If that's the case and you're just not feeling it, don't force yourself to keep fasting. Have some breakfast. Break your fast early and try again the next day. Have some bacon and eggs instead of having this no pain, no gain attitude. Listen, you shouldn't feel like you're suffering when you fast. You don't get an intermittent fasting medal because you suffered more. Intermittent fasting is unbelievably good for you, but things will eventually start to go sideways if you don't listen to your body. Fasting is like exercise. You don't want to overdo it. Chronic cardio patterns, for example, is really bad for you. You want to get the right dose. Again, a common mistake that a lot of people make is thinking that because something is good for you, more might be better. It's that fasting trap. A 24-hour fast, or OMAD, is one of the most powerful ways of fasting. You literally can't go any longer if we're talking about a 24-hour cycle. But very few people would benefit from doing OMAD indefinitely. More isn't always better. Just like a lot of things, the truth is usually somewhere in between. Like once or twice a week of OMAD? Sure. Think about it this way. A lot of things in life exist in a bell-shaped response curve. What that means is if you do a little, nothing happens. If you do a little more, you get some benefits. Then you hit that sweet spot and you get tons of benefits. But if you do too much, the benefits go back down. I actually got caught in that fasting trap a couple of years ago. I did OMAD every day for a year, and things kind of went sideways after a while. Like when I first started, things were great. I was the leanest I've ever been. But as always, life has seasons. As life would have it, I went through a stressful couple of months, but I failed to pivot my intermittent fasting schedule to match the other stressors in my life. So I was over fasting while I was going through a stressful period, while I was doing 2-a-days in training. It was really my fault. I was too rigid with my fasting schedule. Again, fasting is like exercise. It's a stressor in the body. But it's a good stressor. It's the what doesn't kill you makes you stronger type of stress. Unless you already have enough stress in your life. Like if your partner unexpectedly broke up with you the day before and you have to deliver an important presentation at work or you're writing a test, maybe a 24-hour fast today is not the most optimal thing to do. At the same time, crushing a tub of Ben & Jerry's isn't the right thing to do either. Again, the truth is usually somewhere in between. There's even recent studies that shows that for women, the minimum effective dose is just 3 days a week of intermittent fasting. I've definitely had female coaching clients come into my program where I had to tell them to pump the brakes on intermittent fasting because they were overdoing it. And here's the kicker, and I would have never given you this advice when I used to be super rigid with my schedule. Feel free to have breakfast Saturday or Sunday. I mean, don't drink maple syrup or hollandaise sauce out of the container, or just crush mimosas all day. But if you want to have eggs, bacon, cheese, sausage, sourdough or sprouted bread, or some gluten-free pancakes, that's totally fine. Because once you've built up your metabolic machinery, meaning you're metabolically flexible, you should be able to handle it no problem. That also keeps your metabolism happy. Because from an evolutionary perspective, you want to give your body the signal that there's always food available. You're not eating all the time, obviously, but you always have access to food. You're just taking a break from it. On the other hand, if you push your fast too much and too often, you're giving your body the environmental signal that you're potentially going through a state of famine. The byproduct is your body adjusts in a way that's not good for you. That's why I mentioned earlier that very few people will benefit from doing OMAD long term. Again, going back to the fasting trap thinking that more is always better, if you're always rigid with your fasting schedule and you just power through, even though you're going through a stressful time, your sleep quality eventually starts to suffer. For women, their menstrual cycle becomes irregular. Maybe they stop getting their period completely. For guys, their libido might go down. It's because you're fasting too much. Your body thinks that it's in a stressful fight or flight scenario all the time. You always have elevated cortisol levels, which is your stress hormone. The body then starts shutting down and prioritizes more important functions because you're not eating enough and you're stressed out of your mind. The byproduct is thinning of hair because it's starting to break down protein, and your metabolism might even start tanking in this process. It's a bad deal. The key at the end of the day is to use intermittent fasting as a tool. You can do a 16 to 18-hour fast most days. That's sustainable. Again, ideally, you have an eating window of 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. or somewhere close to that to align with your natural circadian clock. For a majority of people, skipping breakfast and having a 12 to 8 to 12 to 6 eating window might work better, especially if you have an active social life. You can then blunt the blood sugar and insulin response if you go for a 15-minute walk after dinner or after every meal for that matter. And then once a week, maybe you're just eating one meal a day and save all your calories if you plan on indulging a little. Saturday or Sunday, you're eating breakfast with your family. Change it up. Again, that's how it was back then, feast and famine. So the question is, should you still do intermittent fasting in 2022? Absolutely. But don't box yourself in a rigid fasting schedule. If you're fading for some reason and you just don't have it that day, it's okay to break the fast early. You don't get bonus points for suffering. The reverse is also true. If you're planning on doing a 16-hour fast and you're feeling good, you're in the zone, and you're not hungry, maybe you extend it to 18, 20, or even 24 hours that day because you feel amazing. If you're not hungry, don't eat. If you don't have it that day, eat. Just make sure to always listen to your body and be flexible. Coming up in the future, I'm gonna make more intermittent fasting videos, so let me know in the comments what you want me to cover. In the meantime, click on this video if you want to keep doing a deep dive about nutrition science because there's so much more to learn. We're really only just getting started here. So click on the video on the screen and I'll see you there.